So I think we have, just a few more minutes.
Yep.
I want to ask you about your spiritual pursuits, because I know you were also very adventurous when it comes to seeking more understanding in the spiritual realm. So can you share some of the
Yeah. I mean,
insights?
that's what it's all about. And I'll also just add the caveat that I do acknowledge that really truly committing oneself to spirituality, to having a relationship with God or with a higher power, and all the practices that go into making that possible are exceedingly difficult when you feel like crap physically.
Mm.
Right? I mean, it's just like if you're terminally ill, or you have, not terminally ill, but even worse so then, but let's say you have Lyme disease or metabolic dysfunction or Crohn's or whatever. Are you going to get up and be like, wow, I'm going to read this deep spiritual book from a mystic in India and really take notes and highlight it and apply the things I learn in my life today? No, man, I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to get up and go to the bathroom, without falling down or whatever, right? It's like, so
Mm.
that's where the physical part comes in. The physical part is about having the energy within your physical vessel to use your vessel as an instrument of your spiritual growth and expansion. So to have the vitality to raise your consciousness and have an actual vehicle to travel the earth plane with that is functional and doesn't hold you back from your mission, which to me, the mission of life in my personal life is self-realization and enlightenment, to achieve the highest level of consciousness I can possibly achieve until the day I check out of this body and there's no more Luke Story. That's what I'm here for. And along the way, what that includes is taking as many souls along with me that are also sharing that same vision for their life.
I love
So
it.
my journey with spirituality, and I wish there was a better word for it, because that word always kind of rubs me the wrong way, because it has so many connotations. It's like the word God, right? It's such a loaded word, but let's just say, let's frame it as just being in touch with the part of myself that is beyond just my physicality, just beyond me, my
Yeah.
body, my mind, my thoughts. Like there's a
Mhm.
spirit that exudes through all living things, and some might even argue
Mhm.
inanimate objects as well in our universe. But my journey was so slow and so piecemeal, just little baby steps at becoming a little more enlightened over the course of a long swath of time. And that started for me primarily being motivated by the understanding that when I was in active addiction and I could not get out of it, it was so painful,
Mhm.
and it went on for so long, and I couldn't make it stop. I mean, I could feel it right now, and I'm not getting emotional because I'm still in pain. I just like, wow, it's the gratitude I feel
Yeah.
that I don't have to live like that anymore. So it was made clear to me when I finally surrendered and just said, I have to get clean. Like, I can't live like this anymore. I got to do something. I mean, I was finally willing to listen to all the people that had been suggesting that I might, maybe you should be sober, right? Which is everyone in
Mhm.
my life, even my druggy friends were like, man, you got problems. When that happens, when your lower companions and people like your drug buddies are telling you, man, you're going too far, you've gone too far. And that's where I was. And, when that treatment center that I checked myself into, I mean, with the help of my mom, it's not like I just walked in there. I really needed, I needed that to be facilitated by other people, because I was totally incapacitated and couldn't manage anything like checking myself in anywhere. But what happened was, they made it clear to me that their model at this treatment center was based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so the 12 steps are a spiritual program designed to align someone with the spiritual way of living by practicing spiritual principles. And the goal there being, and quite a proven track record of this being true, is that as one awakens spiritually and becomes more conscious of their truth, that the need to do drugs and to drink alcohol and to participate in addictive behaviors goes away. So
Mm.
it's like the drinking and using are symptom of what's going on inside, which is a spiritual sickness or a spiritual disconnection. And so that's how it was framed for me. And I started to understand that. And so I started to follow the tenets of the 12 steps, which is a group of extremely powerful and well-organized truths or universal laws or principles. And all of them are designed to provide a spiritual way of living your life. And so in the beginning, it was like praying to God, like I would see in the movies, like putting my hands together and saying prayers. In the beginning, my prayers were like, don't let me die today. Don't let me do heroin today. And I win. I mean, they were just meager prayers, just the bare minimum of survival. And then what happened was really quite instantaneously is that when I started to offer those prayers in that treatment center, my prior nonstop chronic obsession to do drugs and alcohol, those nagging cravings that were driving me close to death at times, went away, and they were just gone in one day. When I woke up the first day in that treatment center, I prayed my ass off because that's all they had to give me. I tried to get strong medication and they said no. They said, go to your room and pray. I would have preferred Dilaudid, but I guess now I see that they were right. So, I started just praying, and I didn't even believe in God. I wasn't raised with any spirituality, no religion. I knew nothing about it, which is probably a net benefit for me because I didn't have to work through, kind of negative dogma. I wasn't like raised Catholic and hated it. And so I hated God because I hated the church. I didn't have to go through any of that. I was really quite open. And I was in such a desperate, humble state that I was willing to try anything. As ridiculous as prayer sounded, I tried it and it worked. So from that day until the 25 years later,
So how did you know it worked?
how
What
did I know it
happened when
worked?
you
Because
prayed?
I woke up the first day in my rehab, and I said that prayer. And from that day until this day, I've never once ever considered or wanted to or craved any drug or alcohol ever again.
Hmm.
And the prior 10 years to that, I literally, I'm not exaggerating, trying to be like edgy, I couldn't go 1 hour without doing drugs. Like impossible.
Wow.
Impossible. Like not at all an option. I had to be high. Anytime I was conscious and not asleep, I had to be high. And I would even wake up in the middle of the night and do drugs and go back to sleep just to make sure I didn't breathe the sober breath. I was really, really in it.
So
It
just
was,
that one session of praying.
yeah. Well, that was the first indication to me, the first verifiable proof that there was something out there that cared about me and had the power to do for me what I couldn't do for myself. It was like an undeniable, irrefutable fact that the only thing that had changed from one day to the next is I had asked God that I didn't even believe in to help me, and it did.
Hmm.
And so when I say like it started from meager beginnings on the spiritual path, I mean, that was the prayer, was just like, help me stay clean today. And then it was one day, then it was 2 days, and so on. Now, that said, if I hadn't continued with my work in addiction recovery after checking out of that treatment center, I'm sure I would have relapsed and I would probably be literally dead by now. I mean, at the very best, a mental hospital or a prison, but there was no successful path laid out for me because of my choices and because of the unhealed trauma within me from my childhood that was driving me to constantly self-administer very harmful and addictive medication, heroin, crack cocaine, crystal meth, alcohol, pills, whatever was
Wow.
around. So back to the point, when I realized that the key to my freedom was the adoption of practices like prayer and just reading spiritual literature, just digesting truthful content that was based on developing a relationship with God, over time, I started to go from where I was in a state of belief or consideration, like, yeah, I believe in God, I believe there's a God, but moving from there over the course of some years into actually having a faith in God. So
Hmm.
not a belief where, yeah, I think it exists, but a faith that I know it exists. I know in my core that it's true, that there is a God. Not only that, that if I petition this God for help, it will help me because it loves me.
Hmm.
And I say it because I don't have a, biblical sense of God as a gray beard guy in the sky. I mean, it's an it to me. It's not a he or a she. It's a he and a she and everything it's infinite, right? Omniscient, infinite, not impotent. I was impotent. Actually, truly, actually, I was, because I was on so many opiates. To be honest, let's get real here. But anyway, back to the serious spirituality. So, Joy, for me, it was like, okay, wow, if I've got this degree of reprieve from my problems, maybe if I apply the same process to my anger, if I apply it to my fear, if I apply it to my sexual behavior, if I apply it to my financial life, if I apply it to my relationships, what if I could start inviting, let's just say, more consciousness into all of these areas of my life, and over time incrementally begin to surrender more of my will to the creator, meaning like my plans, designs, what I want, how I think it should go, all my little harebrained ideas and my clinging and attachments and obsessions. And what if I could just start to let some of those go? And so why I say it was piecemeal, it's been very slow, and it's an ongoing process to this day, because I still, of course, as a human, hit up against things that are troubling, and I have to find solutions that are in the spiritual realm. That led me then to go to India and do a 21-day silent retreat and do a pilgrimage to all of these ashrams in southern India, and got deeply committed into the practice of Kundalini yoga. And every spiritual book I think I've ever heard of, I've not only read, but like highlighted. And then during my day go, oh yeah, remember that thing you read this morning, do that. Right. So it's not like, it's not assuming knowledge and amassing more knowledge of spirituality. It's actually practicing it in my life. And that's what I learned from the teachings of the 12 steps. I mean, you can give an alcoholic the Alcoholics Anonymous book and say, hey, read this book, memorize all the information. They'll be drunk in short order. If you give them that book and say, here's this book and here's how you actually do the things it says to do in your life, they'll probably stay sober. So the only thing gained is actually just acknowledging and getting a somewhat of an intellectual understanding of spiritual truths, and then ingesting them and applying them in my life. Right. So
Yeah.
even, for example, just again to the reference I made earlier of driving over here, I'm at a red light, having a little self-awareness to go, whoa, you're a little agitated. Now would be a good time to meditate for 10 seconds. That's a spiritual principle. Meditation, self-awareness, going like, I'm a little dysregulated. Let me remember who I am. I'm a spiritual being that's pretending to be a person. Why am I like in a hurry? So I'm 5 minutes late for the interview. Okay, so what? Make amends. That's another principle that's spiritual, is making restitution when you've done something morally wrong, or if you've harmed someone or caused someone a grievance or inconvenience, to take accountability and responsibility for it. All of these are spiritual principles. And so what the journey has been mostly for me is not so much about adding more quote unquote spirituality into my life. It's about discarding and letting go of falsehoods that I previously believed to be true. In other words, like, a spiritual life isn't a matter of addition, like, oh, I need to add more spiritual stuff. It's that I actually need to just let go of hurts, traumas, negative emotions, negative thinking, negative patterns of behavior, relationships, codependency. All that shit has got to stop. And the more effective I am at getting rid of all that stuff that is actually not true, or that's causing my life to be less fulfilling, or even at times self-destructive, then when all of that is sort of moved out of the way, what's there is a spiritual being having a pretend to be a person experience. It's just like, it's like, say you clear fear from your mind. What's left is courage. It's not that I have to go out and get courage. I just have to eliminate the fear. And what's left is bravery and courage. Right.
Yeah.
So, years and years, and as I said, continued into my sobriety, just going deeper and deeper and deeper into all of that. Really could be blanketed as surrender, just going like, okay, I'm teachable, I'm willing to learn, I'm just going to humble myself and be a student of life, and do my best to avail myself to God in whatever form that shows up for me. And at 22 years sober, there was a huge turning point in my life, and this is one of the most fascinating and absolutely surprising experiences for me is that at 22 years sober, I found myself, I mean, I had evolved a lot. I had changed a lot. I was doing pretty well. I mean, especially outwardly in my life. I had had a number of successful careers and was doing great. I mean, if you looked at me at 26 as a very broken man, or a boy, really, in all true sense of the word, into a pretty functional, successful man that felt pretty good about myself. But there were still areas in my life in which I was very stuck, especially around romantic relationships, sex, dating, just could not figure it out.
Mm.
And it was causing me a lot of problems, very dysfunctional. And here I am, this really, for the most part, functional person, yet there's this area of my life I just am clueless. I can't figure it out. So that led me into my curiosity around the intentional and devotional and very reverent approach some people in the world are taking now, and I guess have been probably for all time, of plant medicines and psychedelics.
Mm.
And I kind of use both terms because they're not always interchangeable, because some plant medicines aren't necessarily psychedelic. Like the African herb kanna, for example, is definitely a plant medicine, but is not psychedelic.
Mm.
And also, not all plant medicines are plants, because you have the Bufo alvarius toad, which produces 5-MeO-DMT. You can't really call that a plant medicine. Maybe you could call it a psychedelic. I digress. I went to Costa Rica and participated in a 4-night, week-long ayahuasca ceremony, and the level of healing that I experienced in that week was, I mean, it's hard to even describe how much that changed me and how unstuck that got me, and how much deep, deep healing, especially in the trauma that I had been unable to
Mm.
reach through all the forms of therapy, EMDR, hypnotherapy. I mean, all the things. I mean, group therapy, experiential. I tried everything. And
Mm.
as I said, there were just things I couldn't heal. And so that set me on a journey, which has continued really to this day, almost, 4 years later, of very intentionally and periodically, when I feel the time is right and the ceremony of sorts is right for me at that right time, and I've vetted it, and I feel in a place where I'm able to further explore and further grow or further heal. This past 4 years, I would say, my spiritual life and just my general sense of well-being and my functionality as a human has just grown beyond measure. And that was very interesting to me, and continues to be quite a phenomenon, in the sense that for most people in recovery from addictions, the the most proven and effective method of continued sobriety, lasting sobriety throughout one's life, is complete and total abstinence from all mind altering chemicals,
Mm. Mm.
because of something that is referred to in the textbook. Well, I call it a textbook because it's like a manual for life, but in the book Alcoholics for Anonymous,
Mhm.
um, by which that organization was named, they uncover something called the phenomenon of craving. And this is something that's prevalent, and I would say pretty universal, with addicts and alcoholics. And that is, if you are able to achieve abstinence from all chemicals, as long as you don't use any of them, you're safe and you can stay on the wagon. But let's say you were an alcoholic that drank beer every day and you couldn't stop, and then you quit, and then you start smoking weed, you're probably going to start drinking again. And that was my experience over and over and over and over again
Mm.
during my years as an addict. So the fact that I've found so much healing and so much growth by my exploration into extremely altering chemicals of the mind is
Mhm.
fascinating to me. And, I could do a 5-hour podcast on this, and I have done many, but I think it has a lot to do with the healing capacity of how these medicines allow one to get deeply into the subconscious mind, and to just go places where you could never go in any waking state safely, without probably further harming yourself emotionally, especially in terms of trauma. And then also the exalted levels of consciousness that one has the opportunity to experience in ceremony, that have a profoundly healing effect on your entire being, or in my experience. I'm not saying this is for everyone, and I always give the disclaimer, like, I'm not telling anyone to go do plant medicines. I would be dishonest to not include that in my journey, because
Yeah.
every metric, let me put it this way, it's just so interesting to me, going back to the proven principle that if you were once an addict, you're always an addict. And then if you ever do any drugs or alcohol again, you're going to go right back to where you started, which is true for anyone I know that's ever said, oh, I could have one glass of wine, I'll be fine. No, you're not. Then you're in jail a month later and you lost your family and your job and you're back in an AA meeting, right? On a relapse. But if I think about what would happen to me today, let's just say I leave this podcast, I leave the studio here, and I just get the harebrained idea, you know what? I'm gonna go to the bar and just have a few drinks and see how it goes, because it's been 25 years, right? I'm probably fine. I could probably control it. If I did that, I can almost guarantee that within a very short period of time, I would be drinking incessantly. I would be doing all sorts of illicit drugs. I would find myself totally addicted again, and my whole life would completely fall apart. I would lose my business, my wife, my house. It would all be gone, because that's what I used to do. I know, I've lived it many times. However, with the, again, intentional and very mindful use of these categorically unaddictive substances, psilocybin, all the things, right? Ayahuasca, whatever. If I step back and just really honestly, objectively look at the results in my life, because I've had to explain this to a couple of people that have been concerned about me. And, I want to make sure I'm not in denial also, because addicts are great at that. No, I'm fine. I'm just doing ayahuasca every weekend, but if I look at just, let's do an inventory of my life. How are the finances? Better than ever. Is my romantic relationship best I've ever had? It gets better and better every day. How am I as a father to my dog and cat? Better than ever. What does my home look like? It's the nicest home I've ever lived in, and I own it. I've never owned before. How am I doing in my business? What's my state of overall well-being and happiness? Better than ever. It's like any area of my life that I look at has dramatically improved
Mm.
in that timeline of the past 4 so odd years.
Yeah.
So speaking of, back to your original question, I'll wrap it up. I get enthusiastic about this particular thing because it's just
I
so
love it.
it's so paradoxical, and it's just astonishing to me. I mean, just look at my life and I go, oh my God, just 4 years ago, I was still acting out my abandonment, neglect, and sexual trauma from when I was a kid. Like, I was still unconsciously being motivated by the ways in which I had been hurt when I was young. And I'm sure those things motivate me in some ways today that I'll later become unconscious or conscious of. But the fact is, I feel very healed, very whole. And really, for the first time in my life, and it, comes and goes in various degrees, I'd say, but overall, I really like myself and really just love myself. I think I'm
Mm.
so awesome.
That's
And this
beautiful.
is, yeah, and I mean that in a healthy sense, right? Don't mean in a, egotistical, grandiose sense. I just mean within my being. When I look in the mirror, I don't feel shame about who I am. I look in the mirror and I go, yeah, you got a fat stomach, but you're doing pretty good, kid. Like, you got a little work to do here and there, but overall, you're killing it. There's a daily thumbs up, like, man, keep it up, keep going, keep going. You're doing good. You're helping people. You're making an impact in the world, and my life has meaning, and my life has purpose. And I
Yeah.
and I'm not being driven by those unhealed parts of myself that were formerly, so subconsciously and unconsciously motivating me into failure in different areas of my life, and also just not, in some cases, even having a negative impact on other people because of my hurt, of just,
Mm.
even if it's just a negative thought or a brief moment of resentment towards someone because I'm judging them. I mean, all those kind of things. It's just
Yeah.
everything in my life, and not just from plant medicines and such, but the culmination of just committing myself to surrendering my life to the God that created me, and continuing to find ways in which I'm still clinging to control, and
Mm.
having attachments to things and ideas, and preferences, and just letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, and really feeling like now that I have a true relationship, an ongoing communication and relationship, and an awareness that there is something that created all of this and created me, and it's totally here and it's totally available, and it absolutely loves